One of the chief architects of ISIS's online strategy, online propaganda, recruitment, and cybersecurity hacking strategy has been killed in a US-led drone strike. His name was Junaid Hussain. He was a 21-year-old British citizen. He'd been living in Syria since 2013. He was a convicted hacker. He had served time in a British jail for hacking. He was, at one time, he'd been a member of the Team Poison hacking unit. He then left in 2013, fled the country with his 46-year-old wife, and joined ISIS. He was credited with beefing up and focusing their online recruitment strategy on beefing up and really being at the forefront of their cybersecurity strategy and approach to hacking into banks, hacking into security services, and he was number 3 on the Pentagon kill list. So this is a significant target that's been acquired by the United States. With me to discuss this is Philippe Assouline. Philippe, thanks for being here. I'm just curious, I wanted to talk to you about the role, something that's been discussed a lot, but the role that propaganda plays, the role that specifically online recruitment plays, and I think it's interesting to note that he himself was a British citizen.
Yeah, and he's not the only one. He's representative of hundreds or thousands of people who are born in the West, raised in the West, and feel this pull to come to the other end of the world, at least the other end of the continent, and risk their lives in order to kill. So the side of propaganda, the role of propaganda in this is huge. It appeals to people who, like this guy, are into counterculture. It gives a sense of meaning by tapping into religious narratives. It gives them a sense of purpose for people who feel ostracized. It's angry young men. And their propaganda has worked not just on recruiting people, it's worked on us. The focus that America and the West is putting into ISIS, considering what's going on in the Middle East, in my opinion, is very disproportionate.
I mean, it's fascinating. It becomes something that's been romanticized, you're right. I mean, we've all seen those videos and seen excerpts of those videos. We've also seen the fact that, read those stories of those schoolgirls that leave, that suddenly get recruited in their bedroom. And I think, again, he's been attributed as being somebody that has been at the forefront of that. He's also been attributed as somebody who's been at the forefront of directing ISIS to use only secure forms of communication, so all of those non-secure forms of communication. So he was a real strategist for them. It's just been fascinating to see how much to the extent to which they've leveraged social media so effectively, and they've really tapped into something, as you said, the counterculture.
It's brilliant. I mean, have you seen their magazine?
I have not.
They have a magazine called Dabik that comes out once a month. Dabik is a term that refers to a city that's going to be relevant for a battle in the end of days, as according to Sunni tradition. And it's glossy, it's got incredible graphic design, things that the US government hasn't pulled off in trying to fight this. It makes slavery almost sound cool. It's in English. So I'm happy that the coalition forces are starting to focus on ideas and propaganda as something as a strategic threat. It's unfortunate that they're doing it only in military means. I would want to see the West investing in counter narratives within Islam, counter imams, counter theology, to let people feel that they're sincerely Muslim, authentically Muslim, but not follow this terrible path of expressing religious devotion and or finding a purpose in life.
Well, just more to that point, do you feel like Scotland Yard, I was reading an article where they supposedly were going into jails that they'd already convicted terrorists and recruiting them to counteract ISIS. Do you feel like that would be an effective way to do that, or is that just past the point of gone there already?
Both. I mean, there's always going to be people that, unfortunately, this is incendiary, but need to be killed lest they kill innocent people, girls, Yazidis who are just trying to live their life. On the other hand, you're never going to win this fight unless you focus also on the ideological component. And people who do that need to have the credibility to do it. So they need to come from the streets, quote unquote. There's a guy called Majid Nawaz in England who's very good at doing this. And he was a former Islamist jailed in Egypt. And he, I think, has some of the authority. Even though he's being very, very harshly criticized as a cooperating with the West, he at least has the authority. He knows what appeals to people and how to talk them out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It's a battle that can only really ultimately be won in the hearts and minds. I think really boots on the ground or airstrikes from above can only achieve so much. And really, the nobility, what's fascinating to me is that it's the nobility of the cause which seems to perpetuate. And it gives meaning. I think it speaks to the disaffected youth, right?
I think it speaks to testosterone too. Young men at a certain age, especially if they're not finding meaning and success in their communities, especially if they're living the schizophrenic cultural schism between their home life the values at home, and I can identify with this a little bit, the way I grew up, and the outside culture, they're going to be very susceptible to these kind of ideas. And you have to take that into consideration if you want to win this fight. The military side is always going to be necessary, but you're always going to have to eliminate or channel this energy through ideas that are more commensurate with life and liberty and things like that. And the West has completely ignored it. The Obama administration won't even get itself to recognize the ideological component publicly. And the other side said it's all Islam. So you have both sides essentially taking positions that make no sense,
right,
and leaving the center where something needs to happen to dark forces.
I mean, what's been interesting as well is the reluctance of anybody to shut down a lot of these Twitter accounts, a lot of these online social media accounts. They've chosen instead to watch them, to monitor them. They say for surveillance reasons. Anonymous have come out and said that they want to shut down and have actually successfully shut down a lot of these active accounts. Well, what would be your take on that?
I think it's great. I think it's trying to put a finger in the dike, to go with the expression. Controlling the internet is going to be incredibly difficult. The anonymous groups likes to make a lot of publicity for itself, but it hasn't been extremely effective. And if they take a site down, it'll be back up in a couple of days. I think you have to drain the swamp, which means go for the ideological side. And the messages that the US is sending. This Iran deal has the unintended message of telling the Arab world we're on team Shiite, not Sunni. That's also a problem. That's something that the US has to deal with. It hasn't dealt with.
Well, the rift between Shiite and Sunni clearly is one of the a view that's very often been overlooked, or a schism that's been overlooked or oversimplified, shall we say, by successive administrations. I don't know if I necessarily agree with you that the Iran deal sends that signal. I think the two are slightly dislocated in that regard, but I appreciate your thoughts.
I don't think it intends to send that signal. It's definitely being interpreted by some people like that. Look, in Syria, Assad has killed maybe 100 times what ISIS has killed. Iran is much more powerful. It has proxies wreaking havoc in Gaza, in Sudan, in Yemen, in all these places where they're essentially killing Sunnis in most of those places. And the Sunni population sees this, whether they're right or wrong, and they say, why is the US empowering the Shiites? So a significant portion of the population is going to see this deal as the US aligning with the Shiites, which is going to cause hatred of the West or more fuel hostility to the West, whether they're right or wrong. I'm just saying it's one of the interpretations out there.
So you feel that our U.S. imperialistic policies and drone strikes aren't necessarily effective. That's what I hear you saying.
I wouldn't call it imperialistic. I think you have to deal with threats. I think there's no other solution than the U.S. being involved in certain places, but the drone strikes have limited effect. And I think most of the effort now against ISIS, forgive me, I think is cosmetic. It's because their propaganda is effective on us too. It's scary what you see on TV. They're a trivial threat compared to other forces in the region, in particular Iran and Hezbollah. But they are scary, and the Obama administration wants to project that it's strong on terrorism. It has a successful track record with Osama bin Laden, so it's doing this. But it's very limited effectiveness to just kill people at the top. They get replaced.
So what would the answer be?
I think of funding imams and schools, the way Saudi Arabia funded madrasas for decades that created this poison in the Middle East, funding authentically Islamic schools that teach an Islam of love, which does exist. Unfortunately, now it's on the sidelines because of this oil money for decades of pushing this hostile, belligerent form of Wahhabi Islam. But there are very peaceful versions of Islam that are even commensurate with the existence of Israel, things that we wouldn't even imagine. I think the US should just step in and fund this. Why can't people be authentically Muslim and be aligned or conciliable with the West? And I don't understand why it hasn't been done yet. I think the British Prime Minister started touching upon that recently, and it's a great development.
Philippe, thanks for being with us. Good to see you. Thanks for being with us also. Let us know what you think on this. A lot of issues here. We could talk all morning, but thanks for being with us here. If you haven't already, subscribe to the Lib TV.